Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron fight.
This is a great episode. If you've ever been somebody who has followed the steps, followed the plan, the routine, all the
Hmm.
things, and maybe even seen a little bit of results, but then just kind of felt like you either fell off or you felt like you weren't that person yet. You weren't making it yet. This is a great episode to help you get over that hump.
I think that's a common thing when you're doing something new, and especially if it's very new, you want to make big changes in your life or even some small changes. We often there's that self-sabotage that kicks in quite
Yeah.
often, and it's not as easy to see in yourself, but it's easier to see in people. You're
Yeah.
thinking, why is that person doing that? Why is that person saying those things? Why is that person? And I think we can certainly recognize it in others, but really to recognize it in ourselves, take some introspection, and this is part of the episode we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the steps that will help with this.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because if we're an achiever, we look at the person we are now, and then that Kaizen principle, the constant never-ending improvement, always leads us to the
Hmm.
person we want to be, right?
Right.
So we always have that two versions of ourselves. There's the us today, which we should totally be happy with, right?
Yeah.
Like we're in a good spot. But then there's the us that we strive for,
Right.
and I feel like a lot of times those two people are strangers,
Yeah.
like, because
Yeah. Yeah.
we look at that person and we say, oh my goodness, like look how great that future me is, but the actions we're taking as present us just aren't the right ones to get there.
It reminds me when you were talking, one of the quotes that hit in my head that we mentioned this a while ago in one of the episodes, and it was the past does not equal the future.
Yeah.
And you and I first heard that from Anthony Robbins. Now I'm certain he wasn't the one that came up with it, but he certainly was the one that popularized it, right? He's
Yeah.
the one that made it more the mainstream within this uh, community that we're in.
Yeah.
Um, but that's such a powerful thing because it really gives you the permission to improve, gives you the permission that, yes, we've made mistakes in the past, but that doesn't mean that we're going to continue to make mistakes unless you identify as that, unless you feel that that's what you are and you've cemented yourself in that identity. And that can be dangerous, if it's a negative one, of course.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think it definitely can. And I think, closing the gap between that identity, right, of who we are today. We get
Hmm.
so hung up on like who we are today. And really, we want to be that next version of ourselves. And creating that identity is really the first step. It's
Yeah.
about making that identity. And I like to quote, behavior without identity is a costume.
Yeah.
Because you think about all the things we do. I always like to think about New Year's, and I think about that first week and the people in the gym. Like they're not fit people, they're non-fit people that are exercising,
Right.
right? And that difference in identity is what makes is really
Hmm.
what I think differentiates between people who stick with it and who don't.
Right.
People who go in and say like I'm a fit person now, right,
Hmm.
that's my new identity, are going to stick with it. And the people who say, well, I'm on day two of whatever, doing this thing that's not my identity, are
Right.
going to fall off. So I like
Yeah.
that quote.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's all like it's conflicting because you can say, well, I'm lying to myself,
Yeah.
or you can call it truth in advance.
Yeah.
Which one's technically correct? I think a lot of it, to me, the answer is it depends on your action and your intent. If I say, yeah, I'm an athlete, I work out all the time, and I just say that to say it, but my actions and my future isn't planned out for that, then I am lying. But if I have set a plan to do it and I've already started it, I'm not quite where I need to be, but I've started it, then I call that truth in advance.
Yeah.
Even though you can think, well, that's just semantics, it does make a difference because in order for us to improve, we have to do something different than we're doing today. And in order to do that, it's not just about action, it's about your mind and believing that you're going to do it. And that's what this episode's about. It's what's your identity? If you feel like you're a lazy person, that you're not a morning person, you're not this, you're not that, and you keep telling yourself that, and you keep reinforcing it by your words and your thoughts, you're going to stay stuck in that, right?
Yeah.
And so that's not being truthful. That's just being lazy, right? I mean, I'm being truthful to myself. No, you're being lazy because you don't
Yeah.
want to change and improve.
Well, and I mean, really, if you're trying to change a habit, you're trying to change, a behavior. I feel like most people don't fail, um, from lack of willpower. I mean, I think willpower is the thing. We have a limited amount of energy,
Yeah,
every day to maintain things the way we want them. But I think really most people fail because like their identity doesn't match the change they're trying to make, right?
right,
So they're trapped in this one identity of I'm like you said, I'm not a morning person when
right.
in reality, like those things we want to achieve, that business we want to build, that
Hmm.
health level we want, the people who have that, they're waking up at 5 o'clock and spending that first
Right,
hour on the things we talk about, right?
right.
So if your identity isn't I'm a 5 a.m. person or whatever it is, don't
Yeah,
don't get stuck on that, but whatever it is,
yeah,
if that's not your identity, you're always going to be pretending. You're always going to be
yeah,
acting the part and not in
right,
the part.
right. Yeah. Yeah, this can be a little complicated, and it can be, a lot of it is just deciding, just like anything, deciding in your brain, this is what I'm going to do,
Yeah,
and then the shift happens. And I think there's a little bit of that oftentimes you're trying to catch up to your identity, or your identity is trying to catch up with your actions. Could go in either direction. I think there's a little bit of that, but overall, it really is, your narrative,
yeah.
what's in your head. That makes a big difference. So I think we're ready to get into the action steps. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. Let's do it. So, step number one, is really about naming the old identity. It's you can't replace something that you haven't identified.
Yeah. Now this next step, this is going to take a little work, and it's more than just thinking. What's the story running in your head? Like I said a little bit ago, the narrative. What's running in your head about who you are, your
Yeah,
identity? When you think of yourself, and that's one of the things us as humans can do, is we can see ourselves from a different perspective, and we can analyze a little bit. But I want to encourage you to write down some things as
yeah,
you do it. So write down and identify where you're at now, what you think of yourself. Do you think of yourself as I'm not a morning person, I procrastinate, and I don't tell the truth, whatever that is. If that's what's in
yeah.
your narrative and that's what you're
Well,
saying to yourself, I mean, think about the results of that.
yeah. Well, like I don't want to glaze over this one because I think, a lot of times people hear the three steps, and a lot of times the first step is like name the thing, right? Which,
Yeah,
but this is important because like your subconscious is looking for proof of your identity, right? Like your
right,
brain is looking for proof. If you see somebody wearing a gorilla outfit, you know what I mean? Like there's gonna be things that your brain's gonna say, well, that's not an actual gorilla. That's a person in a gorilla suit,
right.
right? And if that person wants to be a more convincing gorilla, this is a grace. If this person wants
Okay,
to be a
I'm
more,
I'm following you.
yeah, follow. So if that person wants to be a more convincing gorilla, right? They need to know what things people are seeing or their brain, like what the outside world is seeing that makes them not believe they're a gorilla, right? I know I'm way off here, but anyway, um, so and those other people in the metaphor is your subconscious, right? Like, what is my subconscious seeing in my current identity that's proving I'm not the thing I want to be, and how do I write those things down? Because those are the things that are going to pop up that are going to hold you back.
Right. Yeah.
It was
So
a
so
long
step
story about gorillas.
That's okay. No, I no, I understand where you're coming from. So step one is going to take a little work. I
Yeah,
think step one is going to take you to think about it, to write it down, maybe rewrite it. But the key is identify. Identify where you're at and
yeah,
really make sure it's set before you move on to step two. And I think what you said, the pre-frame you said was good. Is sometimes step one is the easy one to get you going, but I think this step one isn't going to be easy. But I think if you don't do it as a step one,
yeah.
the others aren't going to work. So
Right.
it's very important. Yep. So moving on to step two. Now this one is important because it's important that you're making a declaration, not a goal. All right. So there's a little bit of difference there. That goals are outcome, declarations are identity statements.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is what we're talking about, your identity. So not where you want to be in the future, but what you are right now. And starting from that set point is going to make a big difference in how the rest of it's going to go, because that's going to set you up for success, or it's going to set you up for failure if you didn't get your identity the way you want it.
Yeah, and this is really where that truth in advance versus that, kind of lying to yourself that you talked about comes into play because,
Right.
saying, hey, I want to or I hope to improve my fitness, like that's a kind of a goal. I mean, that's not even a good goal, but that's kind of a goal where, like I'm a fit and energetic samurai warrior, right? That's an
Right.
identity statement, right?
Yeah.
So when and your brain's going to say, well, no, you're not, and then it's just that continual repetition of saying that. That's why it's so important to write your goals down or your,
Right.
what we'll say your declarations down.
Yeah. Yep. And then you want to continue to say it to yourself, whether it's out loud or in your head, until it's less weird, less uncomfortable. So it's like rewriting that. And Anthony Robbins in his early personal power, the interrupting the pattern,
Yeah.
the Dickens pattern that he talks about, and that's kind of what this is in a sense. That you're rewriting in your head what your thoughts are about yourself. And it's going to certainly take some work, and some people think, well, that doesn't matter. Guess what, it does. It
Yeah.
really does. Self-sabotage happens subconsciously. And why does it happen? It's because of this. You didn't rewrite how you really feel about yourself to
Yeah.
yourself. Other people can see you differently, and that's why it's important that you're getting feedback from people that you trust, that have your best interest in mind, that can tell you how it really is. Because oftentimes our thinking is not in the right frame.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, and somebody is just like, what are you talking about? You're like the best person I know with that subject. How do you think you're not good?
Uh-huh.
And that can happen often. So I think that's a good tip as well that you put in there, is that you make sure that you're working with people, that can help you with that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, your brain's going to look for, again, going back to proof, your brain's going to look for proof that you're matching that declaration. And
Right.
that's something your brain's also going to look for proof that you're not.
Yeah.
So that's something where like actively we need to, at the end of the day, look and say,
Hmm.
okay, like this is how I proved that I am that person. But that bleeds into number three a little bit, which is acting from the new identity first,
Yeah.
right? It's really about asking, based on the identity that you're deciding on, that person you want to be, what would that person that I want to become be doing in the situation I'm in?
Right, right, and it's important that you do that, because you don't want to act from the person that you were, because if you're doing that, now you're not improving, you're not getting better, and small actions towards that new identity, they can really compound. They can really build up quickly. And it reinforces the vision of yourself in your head, your identity in your head, like you're mentioning. When you do that, you're like, oh, I am doing that. I am taking the action. I am getting in better shape. And that builds your confidence as well, which is certainly a part of all of this.
Yeah, and it's like I love my smartwatch because I remember when I got my smartwatch, my activity level didn't change a ton, but my watch started to tell me that I was doing a great job. Like my watch started saying, "Wow, you're," and then my brain started to go, "Hey, you're an active person." And then I said, "Oh, you know what? You're right. I am an active person. There's some proof. Let me crank up the steps to be more, and then I'll try to meet that." And it's interesting how that little feedback loop
Right.
works, right? Like if you just see yourself as that thing and you look for that proof in those small actions, it'll help you solidify that identity,
Yep.
and I really, yeah, it's so funny. How long have you and I been doing like goal setting?
Oh, right.
And
Yeah.
30, 40 years, right?
Yeah.
And I always remember in the beginning thinking, the saying it in the affirmative is it's so fake, right? Like I
Right.
am of this, and I think people who are at the beginning levels or even the mid-tier levels of goal setting, they really see it as, well, it doesn't really matter. It does, because you're choosing ahead of time, what type of person you're going to be.
Yeah, and any shift, any growth, physical and in this case mental, is going to feel awkward. That's not a sign that it's wrong. That's a sign that it's working. That's a sign that you're growing.
Yeah.
Um, Resistance in any goal or any action you take means you're on the right track
Yeah.
because whatever, whether it's you, the universe, whatever you want to think, is giving you that resistance to make you stronger, and
Yeah.
that's what it is. So obstacles are just resistance to improve yourself, not evidence that you shouldn't go, you shouldn't do it.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
like I think the stress of your environment is something that you should think about as you're creating a new identity, because
Hmm.
we talk about you're the average of the five people you spend time with, right?
Right.
And when you change your identity, those five people are going to be trying to hold you back to that old identity. Like, what do you mean you're not eating, mozzarella sticks anymore?
Right.
Whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
And it's important, that you are at least cognizant of that, and you understand that, you don't have to make a grand declaration to everybody like, look, I'm a different person now,
Right.
but you have to be able to, forge past that. And the people who are trying to, just pull you back because they know who you were, who you are now.
Right. Well, and that's why you get people that will leave their hometown,
Hmm.
and I don't think they leave their hometown because they had problems with their friends or their family. They leave it because of the identity of that. And you see
Yeah.
that with your kids. You have a vision of your kids, and as they get older, it's difficult not to think of them as that 8-year-old still,
Yeah.
when they're 28. Um, and so parents can pull their adult kids down if they're not aware, right?
Hmm.
And so that's a normal thing. And it doesn't mean they don't love you or doesn't mean that they don't want the best for you. It's just that's kind of human nature. So you, as knowing this information, realize that, give them a little grace, but at the same time, maybe you need to talk to them. Or, there's some people you need to spend less time with.
Yeah.
And it could be family members, it could be friends. It doesn't mean you can't be their friend. It's just you spend a little less time with them if they're not good for you. I mean, what do we tell any parent tells a kid, watch who you hang out with. I don't know if you should hang out with that person. How
Yeah.
many times have you done that with your daughters?
Yeah.
How many times have I done that with my kids, right? And then all of a sudden, as adults, we forget that lesson that we gave our kids, and we're like, oh no, no. I went to college with him, but he's really good. He's a really good person. And maybe he is, but he's horrible for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we can't forget the lessons that we're teaching our kids, that they're also good for us.
Yeah. In business, I mean, we all have those clients that were like our first paid clients that we hang on to for dear life when they
Right.
could be the ones holding us back. So I mean, I think
Right.
in general that environment's good. And I love thinking about the dojo when we talk about identity, because it's interesting how much time and effort we spend with white belts teaching them the qualities that we expect out of black belts, right?
Right.
When a new student comes in, we always like to say, belt needs to be tied right, uniform needs to be neat, clean,
Right.
together. Because if you don't look like a black belt, you're not going to perform like a black belt,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's why, when other people come from other dojos and say, hey, I'm a brown belt at this place, can I just come and be a brown belt there?
Yeah.
The answer is no, because like we have
Yeah.
standards for our
Right.
black belts that we instill all the way from the beginning and
Right.
grow. But we don't have a white belt come in and say, "Oh, you're just a white belt. You're going to be, new." And we give them the
Right.
grace to do that, but the expectation is, work your way up.
Right. Yep. All right. Let's go through the three steps. The first one is name your old identity, and we talked about this, that this is a tough one. You
Yeah,
don't just need to name it, but you also have to write it down. You have to think about it to make sure that you have, this is what I need to change. This is what I want to fix. This is what I want to improve, and know exactly where your starting point is.
Step two: make a declaration, not a goal. So in the affirmative, make that decision about what you are, what you're going to be, and say it over and over again until it feels real.
Then step three, this is a tough one as well, I think, is act from your new identity first. And this can be tricky because you're going to have those habits. You're going to automatically revert back to how you used to be, and that can be tough. So you have to have some reminders. You have to have people in your life that can help you and remind you of the things. But it's important that you're aware of your thinking, the people you're around, and where you're starting from, so you can get that new identity to stick.
And let's wrap with a call to action for people. Really, take a minute and take one of those identity declarations and write it down somewhere where you're
Mhm.
going to see it. Put it on a post-it, put it on your bathroom mirror, put it somewhere where you're going to see it once, twice, three times a day, and see how that makes a difference in what you do for the next week.
Sounds great.
And
Love it.
that wraps up this episode of the Achieve Results Now podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. Go make those identity statements, share this with somebody who would like it, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.